I'm Megan Behrens, and I am the volunteer coordinator who supervises patient support volunteers. We decided to do this presentation today because who's ever been in a situation where there's been weird, like, conversation you're not sure about as far as the family says one thing, the patient says the other, there's some dynamics, there's some disagreements. I bet
who hasn't been? That'd be more likely.
I bet everybody has had this, yes. So we decided to get Barb Kennedy and Scott Hogue, who Barb is one of our amazing social workers and Scott's one of our amazing chaplains. So both of them deal with complicated conversations a lot, probably daily, multiple times a day even. So who better to teach this presentation and have answers, questions, all of that today than have them. They're the perfect people to have. So it's going to be a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation. You all have handouts that were on your seats. And there's even a handout for difficult questions with potential answers you can help with. But we're going to have them kind of take the lead on the presentation. But we're going to ask you guys to share questions, share situations where maybe you've tried something different and it worked for you. If you had an idea to share to help the family to ease their minds or something, please share that information as well. But otherwise, I'm just going to turn it over to Barb and Scott.
That sounds good. Thank you, Megan. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you were able to make it today, this beautiful sunny afternoon. Well, we wanted to begin just really by talking about the teamwork approach, and really highlight the importance and the uniqueness of a companion volunteer, whether that's a pet volunteer, a music volunteer, or strictly a patient companion volunteer, in that you're really a companion on the journey with them. You're not coming in to fix something. You're not coming in with a set agenda to complete. You're really coming in to be alongside. We looked up the definition of the word companion and I learned something new. It actually means someone under the same roof, sharing or breaking bread together. It's kind of in that venue of a relationship, and how really critical that is and how different that is for you to offer that. So when you encounter difficult situations, if you kind of try to slip into the role of problem solver, then that changes your role from companion to problem solver. You know what I mean? And so here's yet another person trying to fix something that may or may not even be fixable, really, when what they really need is a listener, when what they really need is someone just to be under the same roof with them.
Or a family member comes in and they try to tell you what to tell their loved one or how to fix their loved one, and you're the companion.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So sometimes you can just kind of gently remind them of your unique role, and sometimes you don't even have to do that. It's just a matter of resisting the urge to go into that fixing it mode, which actually kind of takes quite a bit of self-control, I find, for myself sometimes. I have to stop myself and say, first let's listen, first let's kind of journey with them, and then let's see if this is even something that needs to be fixed or even could be. So Scott has a beautiful story that's kind of dear to a lot of people in hospice care. It's true for all of us, but I think in particular it's true for the volunteers role.
And I'm sorry we're sitting down if it's hard to see, but they're filming this. And so there's a microphone here and we have to stay close to it.
And it's zoomed in on that, Christina.
Yeah, thanks. This is a story that, well, you can read it, but I'll read it too. One day my young daughter was late coming home from school. I was both annoyed and worried. When she came through the door, I demanded in my upset tone that she explain why she was late. She said, "Mommy, I was walking home with Julie, and halfway home, Julie dropped her doll and it broke into lots of little pieces. Oh, honey, I replied, you were late because you helped Julie pick up the pieces of her doll to put them back together? And in her young, innocent voice, my daughter said, no, Mommy, I didn't know how to fix the doll. I just stayed to help Julie cry. And more often than not, we don't know. And when I say we, that's us too. It's difficult to know how to fix the doll or the problem, but we can sit with them. We can be present. I remember a pastor I worked with back in seminary, graduate school, and he talked about an old practice that was fast disappearing, and that was the early 80s, and that's called sitting. In our world, we demand results. We want results. And his mother said to him, I'm going to go sit with my friend. And he said, what are you going to do when you sit with her? And she said, we're just going to sit on the porch and be together. And that, I think, I've always thought about since then, that what the little girl did for her friend Julie was more important than fixing anything. She cried with her. She sat with her. And in the Hebrew scriptures in the book of Job, he loses everything, and then his wife says, curse God and die. So he's lost everything, his children, his camels, his donkeys, everything. And then he gets a skin disease, so he's scraping himself with a broken piece of pottery. And his friends come and they sit with him for 5 days and they don't say a word. They just sit with him. And then they start talking, and that's when they got in trouble. So the sitting piece is very important. What I've shared when I help with orientation, one of our board of directors down in Montrose said that she liked when the chaplain came to visit, because the nurse would poke her or take her temperature, and the social worker had to do resourcing. But when the chaplain came, they would just sit with her and let her do and be what she needed to be. And when I heard that story, I thought, that's nice, but even us chaplains poke at you spiritually, but the volunteers don't underestimate what it means to sit with someone and be present with them.
Mm-hmm. And we're going to talk about some tools, some ways to help them sort of talk, and what we call that is, and I know you learned about this probably in orientation, but active listening, reflective listening skills, because those are just skills, again, like Scott said, that we don't necessarily practice in our everyday interactions and social conversations. So it's unique. Again, it's a little bit awkward sometimes. It sounds simple, but in practice, it does take some practice to get used to. So we're actually going to do some little role playing today with those ideas. So we kind of were just thinking in terms of sort of general themes, awkward conversations, awkward situations you might encounter. We came up with some that we've run into. We want also to hear from you some of the things that you've run into. So we'll kind of get started with what we came up with, and maybe that'll get your brains thinking, oh, that reminds me of a time when. And feel free to raise your hand and share.
And let me I said earlier the word triangle, or triangulate, and you probably know what that is, but let me clarify it. Here's a classic example of triangulation. I pull up to the trailer to go see a brand new patient, and sitting in the bed of the truck outside, so I'm telling a true story, are 3 family members. And they said to me, before you go in and hear what they have to say, we want to tell you the true story. They told me the true story, and then they said, could you go in and straighten that out? So what you do is you say, how about if I go in with you, and I'll help mediate it, but you're going to tell the true story. And you've had family members or people try to have you tell someone else something or do something that really the person should be doing themselves. That's what I meant about triangulation. Okay, go ahead.
Well, or, and you're speaking as professional chaplain on the team, of course, when you say that. As a volunteer, you wouldn't even be obligated to do that much.
Right.
I mean, really,
That's-
you could just say, sounds to me like it's time to call the social worker for some help. Or time to call Scott, time to call your chaplain for some help.
It's
And
not-
that is perfectly appropriate to do. As a matter of fact, that kind of helps involve the team as well in terms of knowing what you're running into out there. So
It's not helpful to say, let me slap everybody into next week. That doesn't work.
We haven't found that to be the most helpful, no. But one difficult conversation has to do with, really just the myriad of emotions that people encounter. With anticipatory grief, and that means grief for their own self, their own mortality, as well as the anticipatory grief of the family member. So I'm not ready to die. I'm not supposed to be dying. Did we go ahead? Yes, we did. Okay. My family's not ready. Why? Or conversely, why am I still here? Don't they want me in heaven? I mean, sometimes these things come up for our patients. I'm no use to anyone anymore. And then sometimes we run into a really sticky situation, which is, the word hospice is that's kind of a word that just evokes so many emotions, we just don't even want you to call yourselves hospice. So, you're walking into a situation where you want to be respectful, yet at the same time, it's like I'm wearing this name tag that clearly states where I'm coming from. So really in situations like that, let's talk about active listening and how you might apply that to one of those statements. So let's just pick, why am I living so long? Why am I still here? So an active listening response, you're not trying to answer that question. You don't know any more than they do why they're still here, but you're picking up on some feelings there, so you might try to identify. Sounds like you're really wondering, why are you still here? And it's okay to really repeat back what they just said, and just let the silence kind of spread open for them to fill, if they choose to. Or they might just want to sit, as Scott said, and quietly reflect on that with you.
Asking open-ended questions like, well, what do you think? Or why do you think you're still here? Or what do you
How does that feel?
Yeah, how's that feel? What's your family think about that? Those kinds of questions.
So that they're doing the talking, really. You're not trying to, oh my gosh, how do I answer that question? You don't have to answer it at all, really. Does that make sense? So, how about we try one, and so kind of, I don't know how many people are here, if we're an even number or an odd number, but kind of turn to someone next to you, and let's just try the, I am no use to anyone this way. Somebody be the patient saying that, the other just practice an active listening response to that. Well, then we're going to switch gears, and so of course that was kind of a patient perspective, and then Scott's going to speak a little to the family.
One of the things you'll hear the family as they get to know you, they'll share concerns that they have, and appropriately so. And they might say, I will feel relieved when they die. I have no life of my own, and I'm sick of it. My loved one's suffering. Why can't they let go and die? How much longer can I continue caregiving? It seems like there's no end in sight. And with these types of statements, if they share them with you, that's a gift to you. It's a statement that they feel they can trust you. Now, some people are going to share that. They'll share it with the grocery clerk. They'll share it with the postman. But most people won't share this piece here because they'll look to be ungrateful or uncaring. But they'll realize, you'll see that they do care, but they're wondering how much longer they can care. So it's an offer of trust. And what would be something you could say here that would be helpful in response?
It's been a hard journey. The work that you've done has been hard work. The work that you're doing is
Yeah.
hard work.
Yeah.
Honoring that.
Honoring their hard work, yeah.
I would bring your attention to, if you tell me a great story about so-and-so, I'd really like to know about he or she better.
Mm-hmm.
Do we recall anything? Because our lives are too precious.
Gives perspective, yeah.
Change it.
Right, redirect, yeah.
Saw another hand up. Oh, there we go.
Yes, you.
Have you had time to get any self-care lately?
Mhm.
Do you have somebody to step in so you can have a couple of hours or something that you can... It sounds like you have, you're reaching your limit of emotional stress and you need some downtime.
So reflecting back like that, as well as, I mean, here's another good example of reminding them that there's a social worker on their team who can actually help get some of that implemented for them. I mean, some of these are kind of red flags that you're hearing here. You're not going to fix it. You're their companion, you know, on the journey, but that there might be some help out there with just a simple phone call.
Yeah.
You know, and I also want to add that sometimes volunteers do act as sort of a respite, a brief respite for the family, and sometimes that's not part of the plan, which is also okay. And so if we need to add maybe in a different volunteer or whatever the case may be, that's another thing the team can help you work on.
You might have you might be volunteering and you're supposed to be there so that person can do errands, and they sit with you and the patient. That's because they need, as Barbara said, someone that's not confused, someone to talk to. And the first one with the patient was called companioning. You're not fixing them. The second piece is there's an added element. There's the open-ended questions. What are you able to do that brings you joy? Or tell me about what that feels like. But also there's to resource. If you keep asking open-ended questions, it might frustrate them, but you could say, that sounds like it's getting very serious for you. May I talk to the team social worker? Maybe something could be worked out for more help. And that's resourcing. So this piece here, there's companioning for the caregiver, but also helping to resource. And then there were two people that had their hands up, and then we'll go back here.
I wanted to know what happens if the patient can't go.
Because they don't.
They don't go. We can't. Yeah, we can't force them, but the team works with the patient to see how this is a way you can love and care for your family by going. But if they won't go,
Then we go to Plan B. Sometimes it gets pretty complicated.
and we might even, as a team, or step up the volunteers working with the volunteer department, show up more so they can leave more.
Help them come up with a plan that works.
Yeah. You offer respite and explain that a little bit about it without making, it's very hard, without making any promises. Yeah.
Exactly.
And then, like you said, the family member might not want to go. Sometimes the family member will go because they feel safer. Not that they're in danger at home, but they know there's a nurse there that's going to give them medication on time. I remember one family told me they were grateful for the care center. And they said, Mom said, I love you all, but you're not doctors and nurses. And when I was at the care center, I knew whatever I needed would be met immediately. Whereas at home, they got to call the nurse or, so there is that resource. So
Yeah.
when you're working with caregivers and they want to sit with you, assure them you're welcome to leave, but you're also welcome to stay. Or like your situation where they come home and want to talk some more. It's lonely. And before I started working in hospice, I didn't know this, but I think care provision, and my dentist told me this today. He says, once you stop fighting for a cure and go into fighting to stay comfortable through end of life, he said, he called it the meat grinder. That's the hardest part of caregiving. And so it's a surprise to people. The other part, I'll just give you a heads up, is that folks think, and some of you know this to be true, they think if they, by doing caregiving and grieving each day, they're preparing themselves for when the person dies. It's a whole different type of grief. And that's primarily true with people who've been very close. I was at a death this morning, and the daughter and son-in-law took wonderful care of their mom, and they moved here to do that. And they were more at peace than most. But I've seen also a man lift his face up to me from his deceased wife's bedside and say, "Why didn't you warn me?" Because it was so different. Now you're not going to be probably bedside when someone's dying. It would be. You might be, but just be careful to not say, "Yeah, this is preparing you," or any of those, because we don't know. And then I would encourage you to, and you already do, I don't know why I need to encourage you, but sometimes caregivers feel judged because they have these feelings. You can normalize them, say, I've heard other people say these things too. What does that mean to you? I didn't know what he meant, and I'm like, oh, so what he meant was it was hard caring for the person when they're going through chemotherapy and radiation, all the doctor's appointments, keeping track of the medical bills, driving here and to, and the not knowing, waiting for test results. That's very, very difficult. But then now they're not receiving any treatment. Then you're caring for them, you're changing them, you're cleaning them. You're doing all those physical pieces while trying to go out and find time to buy groceries. But there's the other part, is that each day your heart dies too. I read once it's like cutting off a dog's tail an inch at a time every day. It's that kind of pain.
Painful.
Well, they said docking, but I didn't. It's an old word. But it hurts each day as if it's the first day. Yeah. And that's what he meant, is that it becomes consuming. It's a 24-hour job. One lady said to me, she's caring for her ex-husband, and he's a good man, she says that. But in order to do that, her whole life's devoted to it, and she said to me, when he dies, I'll have no friends, because over the last year and a half, she's lost touch with her friends.
Yep.
So there's that loss too. Yeah.
Chemo and all that, you have like this whole thing in your head, and I know at least for me, being a human being, at the end when you have all that space come up, that's when you actually go to deep emotional places, whether you're a deep emotional person who falls like me, or a regular Joe that stuffs it all, you go there.
Yeah, you don't have things to fill up your day as far as appointments.
Divert you,
and things.
yes.
There's no more mission base.
Right, no more mission.
Busyness to keep you occupied. Well, and I just wanted to make a plug as well. We're talking about homes and family caregivers, and certainly that's a very poignant relationship. But, in our facilities, those caregivers sometimes need someone to talk to as well. So the certified nursing assistants you might encounter there, or the caregivers that are coming in day after day, into that room at the assisted living. Sometimes they want to bend your ear a little bit, and if you have a few minutes to give them, it can make a world of difference. So.
And you bring a sense of normalcy to the place when you come. So, we want to do more discussion, but I'm going to do, Barb, you might have noticed we're
Switching
trading
off.
slides.
You take the next one.
She gets to do this one because I think that
Oh.
it'll be
Okay.
more helpful to you because what comes more natural to me,
Right.
You
It's
know,
awkward for
it's-
me just like it is for most people.
maybe so. Not all of you. I know some of you, but
Yeah. So when we encounter a patient or caregiver with spiritual distress, that can make us feel a little uncomfortable, a little out of our element. Or we do need to be very respectful and very careful, just because I'm coming from a certain religious tradition doesn't mean that that matches where they're coming from. And so how do I really meet the needs of where they are coming from? So will you pray for me might be a question that comes up. Or I'm afraid to die. If they can't help you, they let you die. Another time when that hospice word is kind of scary for people. Will I go to heaven? I mean, do we have an answer for some of these? For my own faith and belief traditions, yes, I feel like I have some answers. Is that what they're asking for? Are they asking for my pat answers, though? No, I don't think so. So, had my faith been stronger, this wouldn't be happening to me. So again, we come back to, how do you answer it? Or better yet, do you answer it, Sue? We really don't need to thrust ourselves into the role of, okay, there's a question, I'm responsible for an answer. No, I'm not. Not as team social worker, not as companion. We don't have to answer the question directly. In the past, you might say, in the past we've talked about your Christian faith. Or you're having some questions about that now, it sounds like. And just leave it like that, and see what they say next. And remember, we've got a whole team of people. You're not out there by yourself. I'm not out there by myself when they're asking me these questions. I may be in that moment, but I've got my team chaplain I can turn to. Even if they tell me, I really don't want to talk to the chaplain. I feel more comfortable with you, Barb. Okay, but guess what? I'm going to be getting some guidance and some advice from my team chaplain. You can believe that. What's the best way to support them and respond?
a person asked me 2 weeks ago what if they were going to heaven, and I said, well, you tell me, what do you think? And he ended up telling me what he thought, and I was able to say yes. But there'll be times where, for me as a chaplain, and that's where we refer, I'll say, here's what these particular faith traditions believe about heaven. Or I'll tell this story about what other patients have struggled with. But for you to say, what do you think? And learn from them. If you've been seeing someone for 2-3 years or even a few months, they might know what you believe, because they'll say, well, I go to All Saints. Do you have a church here? Well, it wouldn't be right to say, well, why are you asking that? You'd say, yeah, I go to No Saints. And so there'll be some of that give and take, but it's always without the idea of converting them to your way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so those can be sometimes really tricky questions. And so remember, just like Sue was reminding us, you're not obligated to deliver an answer just because the question came up. You can sit with the question. You can even say something to the effect of, I don't really know how to answer that. Let's just think of it, let's just sit together with that. I might know someone who does, or maybe we just need to sit with them. Mm-hmm.
I may not have the answer, but I know somebody who does. When they get back with you,
Yeah.
then do your referral.
It's okay to say, I don't know.
And just
If you'll
let the
go to heaven or
silence
not.
stretch. It's amazing what can happen.
Yeah.
And how comforting that can be for someone just to be like, yeah. Don't know. So, would you like to pray practice that one like we did before for just 2 minutes? This time reverse roles.
I know you're shaking your heads no.
Whoever was the patient last time, be the listener this time and flip-flop. So.
You could say, that's not something I'm comfortable with right now. I hope that's okay. Just say I'm not comfortable with it. What I would recommend is follow the directions. Is if they're Jewish or Hebrew or some Christian faith, is to read Psalm 23 to them, or to do the Our Father who art in heaven. The Catholics call it the Our Father, the Protestants call it the Lord's Prayer. If it's a different faith tradition, say, what kind of prayers have you said that have been helpful to you? And they'll say, well, I just pray. Well, help me understand. There's a website called Chaplains on Hand. It's org. I'll look it up before the end. And that has prayers that you could say for all different religions and no religion. And that's helpful too. But if they ask, you're free to say, I don't feel comfortable with this, but I know that I could have the chaplain come out and pray.
And I've certainly done that with the calling for the chaplain. Very appropriate. You know, and another thing I've done is just, how about I sit and listen while you pray? They maybe can lead the prayer. Why do I need to be the one leading the prayer? So sometimes I'll just listen while they either silently pray, and so we're just sitting silently again, or sometimes they actually will say words, and I just sit and let them do that.
If you say, I'm not comfortable with that, but I will hold you in my prayers and thoughts, as was said, or I'm not sure how to pray, so could I hear how you pray? But if you feel comfortable, you can go use your phone or whatever religious material they have and go to a place that they find comforting, and then use that scripture or that reading. And if you're not sure, call the 241-2212 and ask the chaplain for that patient to call you.
And the other?
241-2212, the hospice number. The other part is, one of our chaplains that's now a social worker, that she said to me, the best gift to give to God is to say thank you. So a simple prayer is to say, thank you for my time with, name the person, and thank you that you're with them.
And thank you.
Yeah, thank you for my time with the person. Thank you for this person in my life. And, just one or two things that you're thankful for, say thank you. Amen. And you might be the only person that has said, I'm thankful for you all day. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be real long. And I remember a nurse said, I prayed, did I do it right? Here's what I said. And I just burst out laughing. It wasn't helpful. It's just to say something very simple. Thank you for our time together with this dear person. Amen. So let me look that up, and then you can go.
Okay, sounds good. We actually had a pet volunteer. Okay, so the little dog would go and do a rotation at the care center once a week, and got to the point that the minute she would pull into that parking lot with that pet, the dog would start whimpering. Aww. I mean, it can be really emotional to walk through those doors, in or out. And so that front desk volunteer is a huge resource for people. It's an important job.
It's the first line.
Yeah.
I interrupted you. I apologize.
That's okay, Scott. No, but I mean, and I've been sitting by the fireplace. I love to sit there and do my charting or something like that. And I mean, it's amazing what people will stop and just want to talk about, because it's like, okay, the door's shut, Mom can't hear me. Oh, I just need to unload for a few minutes. And once again, there's that companion role, Before I walk out the door, I just need to kind of leave this here. So thank you for doing that. and being sensitive to that. Yeah. Yep.
Did anybody do the last question? Because I have no idea how to do
The spiritual one? This wouldn't be happening to me if my faith was stronger.
There are some religious institutions that blame the patient for their illness. And so that's something, if they say one of these statements, say, you know, I think the chaplain could help with this. If there hadn't been visiting the chaplain, you can say, how about if the chaplain comes with me next visit? And you call, and I'll go with you. We've done that before. Not to gang up, but to be present. I have a thought on that, but before I do that, what do other people think?
I've been through so much job loss and stuff. I picked do-gooder type fields, environmental and occupational health. So I'm always looking for work, as it turns out. And I remember complaining to the woman I used to work with in a place in the Chicago area. We were in a consulting firm. And she said, Carol, in my faith, she said, the really pious people are upset when they don't get enough hardship in their lives because they think that God does not trust them enough. She was from India, she was a Muslim, and she had an entirely different take on what we usually think about this stuff. So I might say something like that to them. Let them share what she had told me.
Yeah, share that it's from this particular faith tradition, and
Yeah.
Sometimes people look at it from a totally opposite perspective.
That
might
was
be one.
amazing. I'm like, okay, I'll go.
Never thought of it that way. Never thought of it that way.
And you could
huh?
couch it, here's something that I've heard someone say, I don't know if it would apply to you, I don't want to burden you, but here's a thought. What would be other things to say?
Oh, you could, yeah, God doesn't trust them enough if He doesn't give them enough hardship to go through. They may not have enough strength of their religious beliefs.
What are some other, we see what I'm doing? What am I doing? So,
Giving it back.
so what are some of the things, I'll come back to it, it's not fair to, but what are some of the things that when you've faced this question, that you've thought or said to people, or answered for yourselves?
Well, some of the strongest people I know in their faith have died. I mean, if you can give them the perspective that we're all going to die, and faith doesn't have anything to do with that.
Let me know if you find it.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, my partner threw it back at me and said, well, why do you feel it?
Tell me more about that.
And that would get you to talk more about what your faith is, and maybe get into more of what your religious background is, and what faith you do have, and why you feel it's not strong enough.
Sometimes people have to really talk themselves through and hear themselves saying those words before they can kind of
Yeah.
come full circle with it. And just giving them the silence and the presence and the space to do that. Now, you might be the only one doing that for them, allowing that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because others might say, no, you need to believe, you need to. But if you can give them permission to ask, to question. The Psalms are full of writings that say, why is this happening? Where are you, God? Or where are you? And so there's a question of what, if I had more faith, this wouldn't be happening to me. It could be physical, but if I had more faith, I wouldn't be in such emotional, spiritual turmoil. I would trust God. So there are two different levels. So as you've been saying, to go back and say, well, tell me why you feel that way. And with the sincerity that says, I really want to hear that. And if it's out of your league, then you would come back and say, let's bring the chaplain, or just say, this is really hard. I'm sorry that you're having to go through this, to have empathy. We're running a little bit over. One of the things that I have said in the past, but this is a place, if you're going to give it back, it can't be canned. It has to be, you really want to know why they think that way. But I've said to people, what you go through every day just to get through the day takes so much strength that the rest of us don't have to exercise, that all the faith that could be used is being used to its full amount to help you get through the day. If you could see the faith you have as a physical thing, it would be greater than anybody else's in the room. But that comes after we find out why they're experiencing that. If I had more faith, this wouldn't be happening to me, whether it be physical or emotional. I'd be happy. And so you give that back to them to discuss it, but affirm the fact that they make it through the day. And that's an amazing thing. A physical example is Dr. Sullivan, who was a lung doctor. I can't remember the pulmonologist.
Yeah.
Very well known, very well loved. He worked with us to fill in for some of our docs, and we all loved him and love him. But one time he said, for someone with COPD or lung disease, they use up so much energy just to breathe that it's like running a marathon every day. So the person says, well, if I had more strength, I could walk across, I could do this and this. I'm weak. You could say, no, what the pulmonologist says is that you're running a marathon energy-wise every day. It translates to faith too. To using your faith to get through the day. It's amazing how strong it is. But coming back to, what do you think? And it's okay too to, but first that empathy, that connection. And most volunteers, you already have that. Yeah.
Can we just skip to the last slide, and then maybe
Yep.
we can just do a quick wrap-up? And there's the role-playing we did. And then, okay, so basically we talked today about reflective listening, trying to get to the feelings behind the questions rather than the specific questions and answers. Try to avoid getting caught in the middle, if at all possible. Use the team when you need to with that. Supporting patients as well as caregivers, as well as family members, and obviously coming back to your teams when needed. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.